The United Kingdom has towns that defy belief. A village in Dorset, whose residents crowdfunded a stone sign because people kept stealing the old one. A town in Wales that declared independence and crowned a king. A fishing port in Cornwall that bakes a pie with the fish heads sticking out of the crust. In this video, we are counting down 16 towns in the UK so weird you will swear they cannot be real. Stay with me to the end, because number 1 is a place that should not exist, and yet there it is, sitting on the coast of Snowdonia, looking like it was airlifted from the Italian Riviera. Hit subscribe and let's begin. Number 16. Shitterton. In the Dorset countryside near Bear Regis, a hamlet of a few dozen houses carries a name that has caused it no end of trouble. Shitterton, derived from the Old English citern, meaning the farmstead on the stream used as an open sewer, has been called Shitterton since at least the Domesday Book. The name is over 900 years old. The residents have lived with it for generations, but the village sign became a target. Tourists stole it repeatedly. Replacement signs were taken within days. The council stopped replacing them. In 2010, the residents took matters into their own hands. They crowdfunded a Purbeck stone boulder, weighing over a ton, and had the village name carved into it. The stone was cemented into the ground at the entrance to the hamlet. No one has stolen it since. Shitterton is a place that solved a 1,000-year-old naming problem with a rock too heavy to lift. The residents are proud of their name. They are prouder of their rock. Number 15. Bushmills. On the North Antrim coast, a few miles from the Giant's Causeway, a small town of around 1,500 people lays claim to the oldest licensed whiskey distillery in the world. The Old Bushmills Distillery holds a license to distill, granted in 1608, though whiskey was almost certainly being made in the area long before the paperwork caught up. 400 years of continuous production have given Bushmills a significance out of all proportion to its size. The distillery employs a substantial portion of the town's workforce. The smell of malting barley drifts across the streets. Tour buses arrive in a steady stream from the causeway. But Bushmills has a quieter distinction. The River Bush, which runs through the town and provides the water for the whiskey, is also one of the finest salmon rivers in Northern Ireland. The combination of whiskey and salmon in a single waterway is something that only Ireland could produce, without apparent contradiction. Number 14. Mousehole. On the western tip of Cornwall, a fishing village pronounced Mousehole by anyone who lives there and Mousehole by everyone else clusters around a tiny harbour that is barely large enough for the boats it shelters. Mousehole is famous for two things, one beautiful and one disturbing. The beautiful thing is the Christmas lights. Every year, the harbour is lit with an elaborate display that draws thousands of visitors to one of the most remote villages in England. The disturbing thing is Stargazy Pie. On the 23rd of December, the village celebrates Tom Bourcock's Eve, commemorating a local fisherman who, according to legend, braved a terrible storm to bring in a catch that saved the village from starvation. The celebration centers on a pie in which the heads of pilchards poke through the pastry crust, staring upward at the stars. The fish are arranged in a radial pattern, their eyes glassy, their mouths open, their bodies hidden inside the pie, while their heads protrude through the surface, like something from a fever dream. The pie is paraded through the village and eaten in the pub. If you visit Mousehole on Tom Bourcock's Eve, you will see a community celebrating survival with a pie that looks like it is trying to escape from itself. Number 13. Sandwich, in the flat marshland of East Kent. A town that gave its name to the most common food item on earth sits quietly beside a silted-up river, almost entirely forgotten. Sandwich was one of the original Cinque Ports, the 5 medieval harbours that supplied ships and men to the English crown in exchange for tax privileges. In the medieval period, it was one of the busiest ports in England. Then the sea retreated, the river silted up. The harbour became unusable. Sandwich was stranded 2 miles from the coast, a port with no water. The town that had supplied the navy could no longer float a rowing boat. As for the name, John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, is credited with popularizing the practice of placing meat between 2 slices of bread so that he could eat without leaving the gambling table. Whether the story is true or not, sandwich has given its name to something consumed billions of times a day across the world, and the town itself has a population of under 5,000 and a medieval centre that most people drive through on the way to Deal. Sandwich is a port that lost its sea, a name that conquered the world, and a town that most people have eaten but never visited. Number 12. Llanfair Pulgwyn-Gilgogorichu Windrobulanti Celiogogogok. On the island of Anglesey, a village with 58 letters in its name has been baffling visitors, newsreaders, and postmen since the 1860s. The name, which translates roughly as St. Mary's Church, in the hollow of the White Hazel near a rapid whirlpool, and the Church of St. Tysilio of the Red Cave, was not the village's original name. It was invented in the 1850s, probably by a local cobbler or tailor, as a publicity stunt to give the village's railway station the longest platform sign in Britain. The stunt worked. Tourists came, they are still coming. The railway station sign is one of the most photographed objects in Wales. Visitors queue to stand beside it. Presenters on television news attempt the pronunciation with varying degrees of success. The village itself, which most people call Llanfair PG to save time and dignity, is a perfectly ordinary Anglesey village with a few shops, a column dedicated to the Marquess of Anglesey, and a population of around 3,000. The name was a marketing exercise that predated marketing by a century, and it remains, nearly 170 years later, the most effective piece of tourism branding in Welsh history. Number 11. Hartlepool. On the coast of County Durham, a town of over 90,000 people has spent 2 centuries trying to live down a story that may not even be true. According to local legend, during the Napoleonic Wars, a French ship was wrecked off the Hartlepool coast. The only survivor was a monkey, dressed in a miniature military uniform, which had served as the ship's mascot. The townspeople, who had never seen a Frenchman, interrogated the monkey on the beach. The monkey, being a monkey, did not respond in a language anyone could understand. The people of Hartlepool concluded that the monkey was a French spy and hanged it. The story has been told, retold, embellished, and disputed for over 200 years. Historians have suggested that the monkey may have been a boy, that the story may be a transplanted folktale, or that the entire thing was invented by rivals in neighbouring Sunderland. Regardless, the legend has defined Hartlepool. The town's football club is nicknamed the Monkey Hangers. The mascot is a monkey in a Napoleonic uniform called H. Angus the Monkey. In 2002, the man who wore the H. Angus costume stood for election as the town's first directly elected mayor. He won. Stuart Drummond served 3 terms as mayor. A town that allegedly hanged a monkey for being French elected a man dressed as a monkey to run the town. Hartlepool has decided that if you cannot escape a story, you might as well become it. Number 10. Hay-on Wye. On the Welsh side of the border with England, where the River Wye winds through the eastern edge of the Brecon Beacons, a small market town of around 2,000 people declared independence in 1977. Richard Booth, an eccentric bookseller who had been buying up empty shops and filling them with second-hand books, announced that Hay-on-Wye was seceding from the United Kingdom and declared himself King of Hay. He issued passports, appointed a horse as Prime Minister, and established an embassy. The declaration was, of course, legally meaningless, but it was a masterstroke of publicity. Booth's real goal was to promote Hay as a destination for book lovers, and it worked beyond anything he could have imagined. Today, Hay-on-Wye has over 20 bookshops in a town of 3 streets, making it the second-hand book capital of the world. The Hay Festival, founded in 1987, is one of the most prestigious literary festivals on Earth. Described by Bill Clinton as the Woodstock of the mind, the town that declared independence to sell second-hand books now hosts Nobel laureates, heads of state, and the global literary establishment every summer. King Richard died in 2019, but his legacy fills every shelf in town. Number 9. Whitby. On the coast of North Yorkshire, a fishing town of around 13,000 people, has become the unofficial Goth capital of England. Whitby's connection to darkness began in 1897, when Bram Stoker set crucial scenes of Dracula in the town, including the arrival of the Count's ship in the harbour during a storm and the famous scene in the churchyard of St. Mary's, where Lucy is bitten on a bench overlooking the sea. The 199 steps that climb from the harbour to the ruined abbey above the town have been a destination for Dracula fans ever since. Twice a year, the Whitby Goth Weekend draws thousands of goths, steampunks, and alternative culture enthusiasts from across Europe. The streets fill with corsets, top hats, and elaborate Victorian costumes. The pubs play goth rock until the early hours. The abbey ruin, silhouetted against the sky, presides over it all as if it were designed as a stage set for exactly this purpose. But Whitby was weird long before Stoker arrived. The town has been the center of the jet industry since the Victorian era, mining the fossilized wood from the surrounding cliffs and carving it into the black mourning jewelry that defined Victorian grief. Queen Victoria wore Whitby jet after the death of Prince Albert, and the industry boomed. Today, jet workshops still operate in the town. Whitby is a place that has been trading in darkness, literal and metaphorical, for longer than anyone can remember. And hey, before we move on, I hope you are enjoying this video so far. If you are, why not give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves the weird side of Britain? It really does help us out. Right, let's continue. Number 8. Lafan. On the estuary of the River Taff in Carmarthenshire, a small town of barely 1,000 people holds a distinction that no other settlement in Wales can claim. Dylan Thomas, widely regarded as the greatest Welsh poet of the 20th century, lived, drank, and wrote in Lafan for the last 4 years of his life. His writing shed, a small blue wooden structure overlooking the estuary, is preserved exactly as he left it. The desk, the photographs, the crumpled paper, and the view across the water are all still there. Thomas wrote under milk wood in this shed the radio play that immortalized a fictional Welsh town called Laregub, a name that reveals its meaning when read backwards. Thomas described Lafan itself as the strangest town in Wales, and the town has taken that assessment not as an insult but as a badge of honor. The boathouse where Thomas lived with his family is now a museum. His grave is in the churchyard of St. Martin's, marked by a simple white wooden cross. The Browns Hotel, where Thomas drank, is still serving. Lafan is a town that was described as the strangest in Wales by the strangest man in Wales, and it has been wearing the title with quiet satisfaction ever since. Number 7. Berwick-upon-Tweed. At the extreme northeastern tip of England, a walled town sits on the mouth of the River Tweed in a state of permanent identity confusion. Berwick has changed hands between England and Scotland at least 13 times since the medieval period. It has been besieged, sacked, burned, and rebuilt so many times that the town walls, among the finest Elizabethan fortifications in Europe, were built specifically because everyone kept trying to take it. Today, Berwick is technically in England but feels like neither country and both at once. The football team plays in the Scottish League. The accent is distinctive and belongs to no county. A popular legend, almost certainly untrue, holds that Berwick was accidentally left out of the peace treaty ending the Crimean War in 1856, meaning that the town remained technically at war with Russia until a Soviet diplomat visited in 1966 to sign a belated peace. Whether the story is true or not, Berwick has embraced its identity as a place that belongs to both sides of the border and to neither. It is England's most Scottish town, Scotland's most English one, and entirely itself. Number 6. Clovelly. On the North Devon coast, a village tumbles down a 400-foot cliff to a tiny harbour on the Bristol Channel. There are no cars in Clovelly. There have never been cars in Clovelly. The main street is a cobbled slope so steep that supplies are still delivered by sledge, and until relatively recently by donkey. The village is privately owned by the Clovelly Estate Company and has been in the same family since the 1370s. Visitors pay an admission fee to enter. The houses are whitewashed, the flowers are maintained, the cobbles are swept. The whole thing looks like a heritage attraction, but it is not. People live here. They carry their shopping down the hill on foot and their rubbish up it the same way. There is no road to any house in the village. Everything that enters Clovelly does so on foot, by sledge, or by Land Rover on a backtrack that most residents consider cheating. Clovelly is a village that has resisted the car for 700 years and shows no sign of surrendering. Number 5. Cushendun. In the Glens of Antrim in Northern Ireland, a small coastal village contains a set of whitewashed houses that look as though they were built on the Mediterranean rather than the Irish Sea. The Cushendun houses were designed by Clough Williams Ellis, the architect who would later build the more famous Portmeirion in Wales, and were commissioned in the 1920s by Ronald McNeill, Baron Cushendun, as a memorial to his Cornish wife, Maud. Williams Ellis designed the houses in a style inspired by Cornish architecture, with rendered walls, slate roofs, and a square that could have been lifted from a fishing village in Padstow or St. Ives. The effect is extraordinary. A cluster of Cornish-style houses sitting in the Glens of Antrim, surrounded by the green hills and wet weather of northeast Ireland. Cushendun also contains a set of sea caves that were used as a filming location for Game of Thrones, carved from red sandstone by 400 million years of erosion. A village designed by a visionary Welsh architect, built in a Cornish style for an English lord and his Cornish wife, in a northern Irish glen, containing caves used for a television fantasy, set in a fictional world. Cushendun is a place where nothing is from where it appears to be. Number 4. Staithes. On the North Yorkshire coast, wedged into a narrow ravine between towering cliffs, a fishing village so tightly packed that the houses almost touch across the street, sits at the edge of the sea in a state of permanent defiance. Staithes has been losing ground to the North Sea for centuries. Houses have been undermined and destroyed. The original cod and lobster pub perched on the harbour's edge was washed away by storms and rebuilt further back. The village feels temporary, as if the next big storm could rearrange it. But The weirdest thing about Staithes is not its precariousness. It is its connection to one of the most famous voyagers in history. James Cook, before he became Captain Cook, before he mapped the Pacific, before he landed in Australia, worked as a shop boy in a haberdashery in Staithes. He was 16 or 17 years old. The shop, which stood on the harbour side, was subsequently washed into the sea. The spot where it stood is now underwater. Cook left Staithes for Whitby, where he trained as a sailor. The rest is history. But the first job held by the man who mapped more of the Earth's surface than any person who had ever lived was selling buttons in a shop that the sea eventually swallowed. Staithes made James Cook. Then the sea took the evidence. Number 3. Bude. On the North Cornwall coast, a small seaside town has produced one of the most unlikely tourist phenomena in Britain. The Bude Tunnel is a 70-metre-long covered walkway connecting the Sainsbury's supermarket car park to the store entrance. It is lit by LED panels, it is functional, it is entirely unremarkable, and it has over 1,500 reviews on TripAdvisor, many of them 5 stars, many of them written with the breathless enthusiasm usually reserved for the Sistine Chapel. The tunnel went viral in 2018 when reviewers began posting satirical, deadpan praise. An engineering masterpiece that transcends what we have come to expect from a supermarket walkway. Bude's answer to the Sistine Chapel. A life-changing experience. The reviews attracted media attention. The tunnel became famous. Tourists began visiting specifically to walk through it and leave their own review. The council, delighted by the attention, considered adding further lighting and interpretation panels. Bude Tunnel is a perfectly ordinary piece of retail infrastructure that has been elevated to the status of a national landmark by the collective power of British irony. It is the weirdest tourist attraction in England, and it is a walkway to a supermarket. Number 2. Bybury. In the Cotswolds, in a valley beside the River Colne in Gloucestershire, a row of medieval weavers' cottages has been described as the most beautiful village in England. The description came from William Morris, the Victorian designer, artist and socialist, who visited Bybury in the 1880s and declared it the most beautiful village in the country. The cottages he admired, Arlington Row, were built in the 14th century as a monastic wool store and converted to weavers' cottages in the 17th century. They are built from honey-coloured Cotswold stone, their roofs sagging gently under the weight of centuries, their gardens running down to a stream called Rack Isle, where cloth was once hung to dry. Arlington Row appears on the inside cover of British passports. It is one of the most photographed streetscapes in England. Tour buses arrive hourly. Instagram influencers block the lane. Residents have complained that the volume of visitors has made their village unlivable. Cars are parked on verges. Strangers peer through windows. A yellow car belonging to a local resident was repeatedly vandalised because visitors felt it spoiled their photographs of the medieval lane. Bybury is a village that was declared the most beautiful in England by a man who believed in craft community and the rights of the working person, and has since been overwhelmed by a tourism industry that treats the people who live there as an inconvenience to the view. William Morris would be appalled. The irony is as thick as the Cotswold stone. And now we come to number 1. And this is a place that simply should not exist. Number 1. Portmeirion. On a private peninsula on the southern shore of the Dwyrid estuary, in Gwynedd, an Italianate village sits in the Welsh landscape like a hallucination. Portmeirion was built between 1925 and 1976 by the architect Clough Williams Ellis, the same man who designed the Cornish-style houses at Cushendun. But Where Cushendun was a commission, Portmeirion was a vision. Williams Ellis wanted to prove that a beautiful building could be placed in a beautiful landscape without destroying either. He bought the peninsula, which was already home to a Victorian house and a stretch of subtropical woodland, and began constructing a village in the style of an Italian coastal town. Portofino was the primary inspiration. Over the following 50 years, Williams Ellis created a village of extraordinary detail and charm. Colonnaded piazzas, campaniles, domes, arches, fountains, and painted facades line a network of paths and steps that climb the wooded hillside above the estuary. The buildings are not all original constructions. Williams Ellis was a passionate architectural salvager, and many of the facades, columns, and decorative elements were rescued from demolition sites across Britain and incorporated into his village. A colonnade from a demolished Bristol mansion, a ceiling from a Flintshire country house, a statue from a London department store. Portmeirion is a collage of rescued architecture assembled into a composition that looks like Italy but is unmistakably, defiantly Welsh. In 1967, the village gained international fame as the setting for The Prisoner, the cult television series starring Patrick McGowan as a former secret agent held captive in a mysterious, beautiful village from which there is no escape. The series was surreal, unsettling, and utterly original, and Portmeirion's combination of beauty and claustrophobia was its perfect setting. The show has been analyzed, debated, and argued over for nearly 60 years. Fans still come to Portmeirion to walk in McGowan's footsteps, and the annual Prisoner Convention, Portmeiricon, has been running since 1977. Today, Portmeirion is owned by a charitable trust and is open to visitors. 2 hotels operate within the village. The subtropical gardens, benefiting from the same mild microclimate that gives Plockton its palm trees, contain plants from across the world, growing in the rain shadow of Snowdonia, with a vigor that defies the latitude. The village pottery, Portmeirion Pottery, produces tableware that is sold around the world, its botanical designs as recognizable as the village itself. Portmeirion is a place where a Welsh architect spent 50 years building an Italian village on a Welsh peninsula, using fragments of English buildings, which was then used as the set for a television series about a man who cannot escape from a beautiful prison. Nothing about it makes sense. The Italian facades sit beneath Welsh rain. The subtropical gardens grow in the shadow of Snowdonia. The campanile overlooks an estuary, not a bay. The whole thing is a magnificent, deliberate, joyful act of architectural defiance, built by a man who believed that beauty was not a luxury but a right, and who spent half a century proving it with cement, salvage, and a peninsula in Gwynedd. If you visit Portmeirion on a sunny afternoon, when the light catches the painted facades and the estuary gleams below, you will forget you are in Wales. If you visit on a rainy afternoon, when the mist closes in and the village disappears into the trees, you will understand why The Prisoner was set here. And if you stand at the top of the village and look down through the campanile toward the water, you will see something that exists nowhere else in the world. An Italian village that is entirely, unmistakably, absurdly Welsh. And it is glorious. I hope you have enjoyed this video. So make sure to share it with your friends and see you in the next video.